welcome back to part 2 of this 2-part episode of Myanmar Musings, in which we speak to Martin Michelon about Inle Lake, its geography, environments and globalisation. We're starting off with that very question of globalisation.
Indeed, globalization is now flowing into Inle Lake region for the best and for the worst. No? Actually, one of the main conclusions of my thesis will be that 20 years ago, touristic resource was mainly controlled by insiders, by Inle Lake people, no? By INTA, by local traders who were wealthy enough to open a guest house with 10 rooms, something like that. So tourism was controlled by insiders. But since the democratic transition in 2010-2011, there has been a massive change because now you have more and more tourists. So last year in 2016, it was something like 180,000 people or almost 200,000 tourists coming to Inle Lake. So it's quite massive. But those people are also increasingly demanding about, service quality, about room quality, about food quality. And so it has paved the way for quite a few outside investors, to settle down in Inle Lake and open some hotels or restaurants which are at global standards. So nowadays, you have plenty of big resorts on Inle Lake. You have approximately 25 massive resorts on the lake. Most of them have an owner who has nothing to do with Inle Lake. Most owners are from Yangon, from Mandalay, from Taunji. Quite a lot of them have kind of opaque backgrounds and kind of connections with the previous military junta. And it's the same in Nyang Shue town, which is the gateway to Inle Lake. Over there, you have almost 100 hotels. And I could notice in my survey that the original owners, the pioneers who opened their guest houses in the 90s or 2000s, now they have been kind of pushed aside at the benefit of quite many outsiders. So my conclusion is that thanks to globalization, more and more people are rushing to Inle Lake and visiting the area and kind of contributing to the economy. But the dark side of tourism is that this money goes less and less to the local people and more to outsiders. And that's a massive trend. And very little can be done about it. Because, as I said, now foreigners are more and more demanding about hotels, no? And they cannot really accept to sleep in very basic guest houses as they used to. So the local people are really struggling to take this challenge and to offer a, let's say, global standard service to the tourists.
Is it true that the Minister for Tourism at the moment is a sort of tycoon from Inle Lake? Is that right?
Well, the current tourism minister is Wuan Mao. And, well, he's a very well-known and very famous hotelier from Inle Lake. I wouldn't say he's a tycoon because in Myanmar, tycoon has kind of negative meaning now. Tycoon means having some links with the military junta. But Wuan Mao didn't have such connection with the junta. Historically, he was a NLD activist. He was political prisoner for a year after 1988. So there's no doubt about his political conviction and position. No? And yeah, he opened the first massive resort on the lake in 1998, which is called the Inle Princess Resort. And even now, the Inle Princess Resort has remained a kind of reference in terms of quality, service quality of the rooms, and quality of the experience. And even now, it's almost the number one resort in the area. And the good thing is that since the beginning, they have had a very strong and very active CSR policy, no? Corporate social responsibility. And they have done an amazing work in training their staff, the kitchen staff, the housekeeping staff, the managing staff. They have done tremendous work, and they have contributed to the local society much, much more than anybody else, including the government, So when you look at the failure of NGOs and local authorities, in my opinion, the future of development in Inle Lake region is in the hands of sound and smart private sector. Because there's no question about it. Tourism is very lucrative business. It makes a lot of money. And tourists are the only ones who can pay something like $1 extra for a night or $1 extra for a meal for an added value for environment or social improvement. So that's why, in my opinion, tourism should be used and harnessed for the good of the region and for the good of the society. One last example about Inle Princess Resort. They opened last June a brand new private school, primary school on the edge of Inle Lake. Very beautiful school, made of bamboo, kind of environmentally sustainable, which is going to provide some high-level education for children of the area, and for a kind of very decent fee, tuition fee. So that's one more initiative from Inle Princess Resort family, for the Inle Lake region. Wu Mao, when he was nominated by Aung San Suu Kyi, all the hoteliers and all the tourism sector stakeholders were quite enthusiastic to see a capable man, at the head of such a ministry, and they were very enthusiastic and optimistic. However, since he has taken over, I must confess that it has been quite disappointing. His action has been quite criticized by local people, especially in Inle. And the general thought is that Wu Mao is actually not supporting the local small stakeholders. He's supporting and taking side with the big investors, and most of the time those big investors have kind of opaque background and opaque history, no? And so, the small boat driver in Inle Lake, or the small housekeeping staff in Inle Lake, they hoped that he may work for them and help them to make better benefits from tourism. But it hasn't been the case yet, He has, as I said, they have strengthened their hold on rules and regulations and licenses. So it's becoming harder and harder to gain access to this touristic resource. No? So the general feeling is that, he's playing alongside with the big businessmen and not with the small scale businesses and small scale stakeholders. So that's kind of disappointment for the moment, for the time being.
Very interesting. How much do you think of your findings are applicable elsewhere in Myanmar? Did you look into the way that Bagan has changed in the last 20 years?
Well, Bagan has been part of my research and literature review and so on. However, the stakes over there are quite different from Inle, because Inle Lake is a very, very clearly definite entity. No? You can draw the outline of Inle Lake region in a very clear way. It's kind of coherent and compact, no? With its own way of working and its own society. In Bagan, it's a bit more complicated because it's more diverse, and the spatial context is less clear than in Inle. But yes, generally speaking, what I could notice in Inle about local investors and local people being kind of pushed aside from the most lucrative parts of tourism. There's also the same phenomenon in Bagan. For example, what shocked me quite a lot is that in Bagan and in Inle, you have a trendy hostel for backpackers, which is a chain owned by some foreigners. And so their hostels are very successful. They get hundreds and hundreds of young backpackers who are craving for backpackers atmosphere. So those hotels are foreign owned, and the manager in those hotels is also foreigner, and even the receptionists are foreigners. So they hire some young backpackers who want to live in Myanmar and have this kind of Myanmar experience for a few months. They give them very symbolic salary, something like $400 a month, which is barely more than a local staff. And those people will be receptionists in the hostel. So that kind of shocks me to see that even this position of receptionist is now taken by some outsiders and is not given to local people. And so this trend, this kind of tourism resource being taken from local people by some outsiders, it's a phenomenon that we can notice everywhere in Myanmar. So the new government, the NLD government, has some promising projects about community-based tourism in Myanmar. So there's one project on the east side of Inle Lake, led by the Pao people. In Bagan area, you have a few of them. In Karen State, in Tandwiji, you have some. However, I find that those community-based tourism are really slow, to get into motion. They have been kind of underway for quite a few years. They have been built up quite slowly, and for the time being, they have had quite minimal impact, on the population. So the NLD government is having a kind of double strategy. On the one hand, they support a very few CBT projects, but on the other hand, they also ban more strongly than before the small guest houses, which don't have license for foreigners. They used to get some foreigners anyway, in the last few years, but now the NLD is reinforcing, the law enforcement, and they are being very firm and very strong about licenses. So now, if you're a small investor, let's say a small tradesman somewhere in Myanmar, if you want to build a hotel for foreigners, it will be very complicated because there are more and more rules and more and more standards. For example, if you want to be a hotel with a proper hotel license, you need to have 20 rooms at least. You must have a restaurant in your hotel. You must have elevator in your hotel. Otherwise, you cannot have license for a hotel, But who can afford such standards? Only the very richest. The local people, the local elites with a little bit of money, but not too much, they are really struggling now to make their way into tourism sector and to make benefit from it. One more issue with the tourism money is the entrance fee, which has been levied in Inle Lake region for more than 10 years now. As you may know, as soon as you arrive in Inle Lake, now you have to pay $10 entrance fees, which are supposed to be used to preserve Inle Lake environment and Inle Lake society and so on. However, for many years, and until very recently, this money hasn't been used. This money wasn't used for this purpose. Actually, this entrance fee wasn't levied by the government, but it was levied by some private companies with very sketchy background and very and very strong connection to the previous government and to the junta. And this money was not used for Inle Lake. I want to say it clearly. For many years, this money went into the pockets of some local businessmen, well-connected businessmen, that's all. And then one small part of this money was then scattered between the townships in southern Shan State. So Niangshui Township, so Inle Lake Township, could get only a drop, of this entrance fee. And then where did this money go? This money mainly went to the irrigation department, which tackled some wide-scale and little useful dredging work on the lake, and that's all. If you look at the achievements which were done thanks to this entrance fee money, it's nothing. Just 1 or 2 public toilets, that's all. So our hope is that last April, the new the tender for this entrance fee levying was won by a local businessman from Niangshui. And he has done a lot of efforts for transparency. So every month on Facebook, he posts, the statistics for the whole month, how many visitors they got, how much money they could get, through this entrance fee. So it's a transparency effort, which is in very strong contrast with the previous bidders and the previous businessmen which had this activity. So hopefully this entrance fee money can be used in a better and more transparent way for Inle Lake. So that's one of the bright news that I can see about Inle Lake.
The final thing that I always do on this podcast is I ask guests to issue a recommendation. So is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners? You can recommend a book, a restaurant, documentary, anything at all, as long as it's to do with Myanmar.
Well, my recommendation for Inle Lake would be for the visitors to hire a boat and sail through Inle Lake down south. And first you stop in Impokon village, which is quite well known for textile weaving and so on. But at the entrance of Impokon village, you have the Inta Heritage House, which is also known as the Cat House. And this Inle Heritage House is a project that was initiated by the Inle Princess Resort, always the same family doing good stuff. And this Inle Heritage House is a kind of small museum about Inta way of life. They have a great restaurant with typically Inta food made with organic vegetables from the garden. And it's also a training center for young people who want to work in tourism sector. So over there, they can follow a full year training about tourism jobs. And so after this year of training, they have amazing knowledge and amazing skills. And all those youth are from Inle. Most of them are Inta people. And that's a great way for them to access to high responsibilities in tourism sector, become, manager or assistant manager or chef in a restaurant or something like that, and to grant them access to high responsibility. So that's a great initiative. And if you go there, you will visit this training center. They also rent 6 bungalows to kind of give stable income for this project. And they have a water treatment plant, and they also have a cat center to preserve the Burmese cat species, which was threatened a while ago. So they are trying to preserve this very special breed of cats. So it's a very nice place in a very pleasant atmosphere, and it's one of the best places to spend your money in a useful and sound way.
That's an absolutely sensational recommendation. Thank you. And thank you so much, Martin, for joining us on Myanmar Musings. It's been a really, really interesting conversation.
Well, thank you very much.